Welcome, everybody, to the first in our new webinar series. My name is Aoife Glass, and I am the Digital Communities Manager for IWG Women in Sport. That's the International Working Group on Women in Sport. This webinar is our kick-off event as part of our Pearl Anniversary celebrations. So we are celebrating 30 years of IWG Women in Sport, and we have lots of different events and happenings ahead of us. But we wanted to start off with this webinar looking back at the formation of IWG Women in Sport, reviewing the history of this organisation and looking at what the current Secretariat has planned and maybe even beyond what we'd like IWG Women in Sport to achieve in the future. I'm joined by three incredible speakers. At the heart of IWG is a global network. It's all about connecting people working towards gender equity and equality for women and girls in sport and physical activity. And we wanted to go back, review how things have formed, and then look forward. And without the people joining us on this call, we just wouldn't have IWG in its current format. So I'd like to first start off by introducing Dr. Anita White OBE. Hello, Anita. Thank you very much for joining us.
Hello.
So Anita is a respected leader in the field of gender equality in sport. She's one of the founding members of the IWG and chair of the organising committee for the Brighton Conference, which was the first global conference on women and sport. Anita has an academic career in higher education as a researcher and teacher before moving into sports administration as one of the most senior women in the GB Sports Council, now known as UK Sport and Sport England. Anita has also worked as a consultant on women in sport and sports policy and sports development, and was an international hockey player, coach, selector, and administrator. And that is only a tiny proportion of Anita's incredible CV. I will be touching a little bit on her history during the session. We'd also like to introduce Professor Elizabeth Pike. Elizabeth is the research lead for IWG Women in Sport. She's also professor and head of the Institute of Sport at the University of Hertfordshire, a role she's held since 2017. Elizabeth's work focuses on issues of equality, diversity, and inclusion in and through sport. She's published widely on these topics, including her most recent ebook entitled The International Working Group on Women and Sport, 1994 to 2024, The Challenge of Change, which charts the full history of IWG to date and is available as a free download. We will be sharing the link to that as well during the session. And along with Anita, Elizabeth co-founded the Anita White Foundation and more recently administered applications for the Anita White Fund, which the IWG will be excited to announce the recipients of very soon. So watch this space for that. And finally, we have Lisa O'Keefe. Lisa is the Secretary General for IWG Women in Sport, while the Secretariat is in the UK. Lisa's previous role was Executive Director of Insight at Sport England, where she led the globally recognised This Girl Can campaign. As a former athlete, she won 45 Scotland international rugby caps and competed in 2 World Cups, 1 European Championship and numerous Six Nations. Lisa is an advocate for women's sport with extensive knowledge regarding the barriers women and girls face, the need for research and insight to create systemic change, and the value of IWG for connecting people wanting to make these changes. I'm really looking forward to hearing what all of our wonderful guests will be talking about today. But let's start off with you, Anita. Let's go back to the formation of IWG Women in Sport. Could you tell us why IWG was founded and what the original goals were for this organisation?
I'll do my best to remember. 30 years. I don't think any of us particularly thought we'd be there 30 years later talking about it, but here I am. So the International Working Group was one of the outcomes of the Brighton Conference. So really, I need to say a little bit about why we held the Brighton Conference. There was a feeling that there was quite a bit of work on women in sport going on in different parts of the world. And the GB Sports Council was involved in this with other sports councils in Commonwealth countries and with a European group. It was our turn to host a European conference in the UK, and we thought, well, actually, there's enough going on that we should bring in a wider audience, which is what we did. And we had 284 delegates from 84 different countries, which actually exceeded our expectations at the time, because we had people represented from the Olympic movement, from sports councils, from education, international federations. So from that point of view, and a lot of the people that came were decision makers, people that were in a position of some power and responsibility in their organizations. And there was a great, I can only describe it as a sort of feeling or wave that there was at the conference, saying this can't end here. We need to make this sustainable. We need to carry on the work and communicate with each other. Really, as you described at the beginning, having some kind of a network that would gain power from the different members of the network to really make some changes with regard to gender equality in sport. We all recognised that there was work to be done. We were all of a mind about this, and we found that in different parts of the world, people shared many of the same problems and issues. So the conference really wanted us to do something about it, and we weren't quite sure what to do. We didn't have much time to think about it, but we decided that what we should try to do was set up some kind of a steering group, or what became known as a working group, with representatives from different organizations and different continents to carry the momentum forward from the conference. The main tool being the Brighton Declaration on Women in Sport. And it was about promoting this declaration and getting organizations to sign up to it. That was really our first major task. And indeed monitoring that and having another conference in 4 years' time. So the pattern of conferences, monitoring what we'd done, coming up with a strategy for the future was set really from that first conference.
Can you tell us a little bit more about the Brighton Declaration? Like, so for anyone who's unaware, we will poll you later to see, poll our audience members later to see how many of the organisations out there have signed up to it.
Yes,
what is the Brighton Declaration? Well,
Lisa can probably say how many people have signed up to it. I know we got a couple of hundred in the first 4 years. It was called a charter originally for women in sport, which set out a set of principles in order to achieve gender equality in sport. And these cover everything from sport in schools, junior sport, physical education, right through to top level sport. So it's sort of from playground to podium. It covers information, research, all the different elements that are needed to actually take forward the women in sport movement.
I think we have over 600 signatories currently, Lisa. What's the count we're looking at?
Yes, we do, Aoife. And interestingly, I was thinking as Anita was talking there, my first job in sport was working for Women in Sport, or as it was then, the Women's Sports Foundation. And my first day in the office, my very first task was to read the Brighton Declaration.
Good.
So it makes me smile, Anita, because then I know what an important document it was when it was created. But reflecting now, and as we're approaching almost 600 signatories across the globe, and we're having conversations with a number of organisations that want to sign up, it's as important and impactful now as it was when it was originally written all those years ago, which is testament to the work of those who made it happen.
Absolutely. I'm glad you realise that.
Maybe I didn't at the time, but I do now, I promise.
We should also say that it has, of course, been updated because things do change, believe it or not. And there are some different issues now than there were back 30 years ago. So it was updated in Helsinki in 2014. So it's now known as the Brighton plus Helsinki Declaration.
We strongly recommend, if you haven't signed up for it, definitely having a read and getting in touch if that is something that your organisation, if it hasn't already signed up to, would be interested in finding out more about. Anita, so 30 years ago, you have this pivotal moment where you've come together with individuals and organisations, and you decide we're going to take action, we're going to create this document, and we're going to create this working group to carry it forward, to keep the momentum going, to turn these words into action, into actual change, to systemic change. 30 years later, IWG Women's Sport is going strong. We've got many signatories and more coming. This could be a difficult question for you, but what's your favourite moment then in the 30-year history of IWG?
I know, I thought this was going to be, it's so difficult to answer. I will always remember the feeling I got on the last day of the Brighton conference when I was chairing the plenary session. And I wasn't really sure what was going to happen. But what happened was that one by one, people raised their hand and stood up and pledged to do certain things. Obviously, the Brighton Declaration had at that point just been adopted by the whole conference. So they voted on that, which was a pretty special moment in itself. But then it was the way that people said, and this is, I'm going to go back and contact this international federation, or I'm going to go back and speak to the Minister of Sport in my country, or all kinds of actions like that. And there was just a swell of, I don't know, enthusiasm and commitment for what this thing was all about. So I think that's got to be, because of the feelings that it engendered, I can still recall those. That's got to probably be my favourite moment. But then possibly two of the most significant things that happened in that first term while I was a co-chair was that we managed, the UN, we got them to change the wording of the Beijing Platform for Action to actually include physical education and sport. And we got a letter from the IOC saying they were adopting the Brighton Declaration, which was pretty amazing because on the whole, they didn't adopt other people's declarations, they did their own. So, you know, we managed to get sport on the women's agenda and women on the sport agenda with the major players in those fields. And that was pretty important strategically, I would say.
And what about for you personally as well? Like, how do you feel to have been so instrumental in such a significant, not really just a moment, a movement within women's sports and how things are developed? Like, what impact has it had on you personally?
Oh gosh, that's a difficult question. Well, I'm obviously very, very thrilled at seeing the progress that has been made. But I think, you know, life is often like this. I was in the right place at the right time. And, you know, I'm a firm believer that everyone can make a difference. You've just got to see where you are and work out how to do it. I was fortunate. I was working at GB Sports Council. They were very tuned in to the whole idea of women, gender equality in sport. I think we called it Women in Sport then. And so, you know, they were supportive of the idea to have the conference and facilitated it. I was just lucky to be there.
I think it's clear though that you were the right person as well in the right place at the right time with the right motivation to drive this forward. And I know that we're all very grateful that you were there and did help drive those changes. And there's still obviously a lot of work, but progress has been made, but there is still a lot of work to be done regarding gender equality in sport and physical activity. What do you think are the biggest challenges and opportunities facing this area?
Well, I think, and I've said this before, and I know that the Global Executive are well aware of it, but there are parts of the world that are far behind other parts of the world on gender equality as a whole. And, you know, we have that index that's produced that suggests where different countries sit on that scale. So I think for women in sport, the women in sport movement, it's reaching those parts that haven't been reached yet, and finding ways of there will be women working on it in those countries. Believe you me, you couldn't name every single country has got some women who are passionate about this, but some have not managed to yet to break into and influence those in power with the power and responsibility in sport to do anything about it. So I think that's one of the biggest challenges, is to reach those parts of the world that haven't yet been reached.
And I know that that's something that IWG is very keen to try and help, is facilitate those connections, that network that enables people to sort of access information, access maybe case studies or examples, or people that can help move the movement forward as a whole globally, whatever level, whatever stage that area or that individual or that organisation is at with regards to gender equality in sport and physical activity. Elizabeth, let's move on to you now, because that's sort of the history of the start of IWG Women in Sport. And you've been doing a lot of work, your research has looked at, amongst many other things, the impact that IWG Women in Sport has had over its 30-year history. Could you, this is a big question, I really, and I'm sure that there is a whole webinar series we could do just on this subject. But could you tell us a little bit about what your research has shown us about the impact that IWG has made?
Yes, absolutely. And you're right, Aoife, this is a whole series in itself, thanks to Anita and other colleagues. I mean, as we've mentioned, the IWG has collaborated with key stakeholders to give visibility to gender issues in sport, and really demonstrate the value of gender equality for everyone. So not only for women and girls, but everybody benefits from gender equality. And that's been particularly in relation to the major social concerns that have faced societies in the 30 years since the IWG was established. And I think it's really notable that around the same time as the IWG was established, the United Nations set out a plan of action, which has since developed into the current Sustainable Development Goals, as the blueprint for global peace and prosperity. And they're about reducing inequalities and improving human lives. And when you go to the IWG has helped to raise awareness of the value of sport and physical activity for reducing inequalities and improving human lives with respect to health and well-being and prosperity and so on. And the IWG also connects the global network to collaborate for women's rights as human rights, so that women and girls can thrive. And Anita's just mentioned about the history of the Secretariat. Every 4 years, a new country takes on the Secretariat and has a legacy. And that's progressed from 1994 in the Brighton Conference, where they were identifying what the issues were, to 1998 when there was a call to action. And then subsequently there have been toolkits for how to take action, building the network, which is now this global digital community with the shared resources on the Insight Hub. And that's been a really significant shift in 30 years. 1994, the internet was in really fledgling late stages of development. And now the IWG is a globally connected community with data and insights that are shared to help to understand approaches to gender equality and to adopt those into practice. So that's the short answer to the very big question, Aoife.
And as you said, as technology evolves, it means that the IWG can evolve, the network can evolve with it, and hopefully find new innovative ways of connecting people, connecting individuals, connecting organisations, sharing that information, empowering the network, so that we're all working together and building on the work of each other, and sharing the knowledge and resources globally. I'm going to ask you the same question, Elizabeth. What's been your favourite moment in the 30-year history of IWG? Everyone's going to get this question, because I'm really intrigued to see kind of, does everyone pick something similar, or are there different moments that speak to each of our participants?
I'm going to be a bit cheeky, because my favourite moment is the moment that happens every 4 years at the global conference, which is focused on actions to bring about change. That's Global Summit is genuinely a unique event that brings together policymakers, practitioners, academics, who were all absolutely committed to sharing knowledge and resources and skills, and in some cases funding opportunities, to influence decision makers, and to inspire the participants to go back to their home countries, their home organisations, to be change makers. And, you know, Anita just gave the example from the Brighton conference of, you know, people putting up their hands. I've witnessed so many examples at those conferences of people from those different parts of the sporting ecosystem connecting at the event and forging ongoing collaborative partnerships to make the changes that are needed to the structures and values of sport for gender equality. So it's that moment that happens, you know, every 4 years. And I think if I was going to pick one specific moment about the way that IWG facilitates those connections across the network for the shared learning and support with a tangible outcome, I'd pick Japan. Japan identified the IWG as absolutely crucial to legislative change in Japan, which means now gender equity is embedded in Japanese law. But they did that in a way that was appropriate to Japanese society and culture at the time. And when Japan hosted the IWG Secretariat, their legacy was a symbol of Asian characters, so that it made sense in their culture and demonstrated commitment to building the network to realise gender equality in and through sport.
And so that's something also sort of worth flagging up as well, that the Secretariat moves every 4 years. So every 4 years, a different country has the opportunity to host the Secretariat and host that global conference. The next global conference, by the way, for those watching, is taking place in Birmingham on the 9th to the 11th of July in 2026 in the ICC.
Searching an ebook, which Aoife very kindly plugged at the beginning of the webinar. And I'm going to say something that authors never say, which is don't buy the book. It's available as a free ebook. It's on the IWG website. Download it. And it was a real privilege that I got to speak to all of the former IWG secretariats and the current ones. So I interviewed Anita as the first co-chair, Lisa as the current Secretary General. And if there are other people on the call who I interviewed, thank you. It was so informative and genuinely a privilege. And the kind of key headlines that came out of that book is the IWG is the network of networks that are committed to gender equity in sport. And social movements are most effective when they combine individual activism with strategic organisational policies and partnerships. There's real power in collaboration to create societal progress and change. Some of the women I spoke to told me that they met resistance in advocating for issues for women, and it took their perseverance, but also key allies to enable them to make progress. And those allies include male allies. So gender equity is an issue for all genders, obviously, not just for women. And the women talked a lot about the real importance of working in what one of them called a culture of yes. Working, and I'm sure Lisa will talk much more about this in terms of the culture of yes in the UK Secretariat, where there's a commitment to systemic approaches to really making a difference. And of course, it's all epitomised in the way that the IWG operates itself. So that was what came out of the book. But I should say the book isn't the end of this journey. It's the beginning of the journey. So the IWG has had a consistent theme of change right from the beginning. You know, Anita mentioned about the challenge of change as the theme of the first conference. And with the team of researchers at the University of Hertfordshire, in addition to the book, we've undertaken a global policy review and surveyed the signatories of the Brighton Declaration that Anita was talking about earlier, to start to identify the key components that enable change. And what we're looking to do is to provide a framework for change that will have really concrete examples and actions, strategies for lobbying for change, that we'll share on the Insight Hub, so that you can take that back to your own organisations to inform your own practice in a way that's appropriate to your own state of readiness and social context. And of course, Lisa is an expert on theories of change, and I'm sure she'll talk more about that as well.
Thank you very much for that, Elizabeth. And the Insight Hub is a key part of IWG Women in Sports. So it's where we will share research, case studies, policy, best practice examples. So do have a look at that. There's a lot of very, very useful resources on there, and we would love, again, if you or your organisation has some interesting research or case studies that you think would benefit the network, please get in touch and share it with us, because we would love to add that to this global resource. With that introduction, I mean, we have to bring in Lisa at this point. Lisa, you are the current Secretary General for the Secretariat, which is hosted in the UK at the moment. We have it here in the UK until 2026. What was both your role in bringing IWG to the UK and your personal motivation to leading and hosting it here?
Well, first of all, to say, I think I played a relatively small role in IWG coming to the UK. And I say that because I was part of the steering group who worked hard to think through why we wanted to host IWG, both from a global perspective, what was the job that needed to be done, but also how could we make the most of that opportunity here in the UK. And I should pay tribute at this point, actually, first of all, to Anita, who's always been in the background, thinking about where next and who next, and having those conversations with people and reminding them of the importance of IWG. And also Lisa Wainwright at the Sport and Recreation Alliance, who brought a few of us together to talk about why we might want to bid. And we bid right at the start of the COVID pandemic. So we did the whole process of pulling the bid together remotely on Zoom, like this. But we were really clear that what the pandemic was demonstrating was just how fragile some of the gains can be. And I think back to 30 years ago, Anita, and I think how far we've come, but I do know that those gains are hard fought and can be lost quite easily. So for me, the motivation to bid was, how could we use the opportunity of bidding for IWG to bring a group of organisations and stakeholders together in the UK to really focus on women and girls sport and how we could recover post-pandemic. How could we continue to play our part to think about what it would take for IWG to be as impactful in another 30 years' time? So what could we do now to help set it off for that next 30 years? But also to ask the question of where do we add the most value in 2024, and what can we best focus our effort and resource on? And so the bid for us really was about asking people those questions and responding to that. And we've designed a strategy that really does respond to what stakeholders told us would be most important. And if I could just add, in terms of personal motivation on this, as you kindly said in the introduction, I have a long history of both being in sports administration but also playing sport. And I've encountered the best and the worst of sport, frankly, in terms of the wonderful opportunities and the impact that it can have. But I've also had opportunities where I've been made to feel different. And I've also had moments where my career was blighted because of lack of opportunity, particularly around injuries. And so, for me, this is an opportunity to work with others who equally care about the potential impact of sport and physical activity on the life chances of women and girls, And I should say that's men and women, boys and girls. That's the best part of this role. We get the opportunity to work with people who really care. And that just makes me want to redouble my efforts. So it does feel deeply personal at times, Aoife.
I think that's something that comes through with speaking to all three of you, though, as well, that this is obviously something that everyone's really passionate about. So it's something that everybody believes in, that wholeheartedly feels that this is a worthwhile cause, this needs to change, we need to make things better, so that future generations of women and girls don't face obstacles, that they're in an environment that means that they can thrive, whether that's as an athlete, whether that's in sports governance, whether that's just in day-to-day life and physical activity for a healthy, empowered life. Anita, as well, so do you feel that that you begin to see changes happening as a result of this? And what kind of things do you think, sort of the successes that we've had, and where do you think things need to develop in the future? What would you like to see?
Well, I was just going to comment, Effie, on what you said, because it sounds as if everything in the garden is rosy, but it isn't. And there is still huge discrimination and prejudice about women in sport. There are many people, for example, that believe that male coaches are inherently better than female coaches. Nothing to do with their knowledge of coaching, but just to do with their gender. It's still difficult for women to hold some of the most responsible leadership positions in sport. That's an ongoing battle. There is still prejudice, even going to the other end of the spectrum, of kids being brought up, socialized in particular ways that are gender specific. The kind of toys that parents buy their daughters and their sons are different. The amount of time and encouragement they give to them. So I don't think we're there by any means. The fact that there have been some quite dramatic changes, particularly in the UK, in terms of the visibility of women's top-level sport, we celebrate that, but I don't think we should ignore all the other stuff that still needs to be done.
Elizabeth, could you comment on that as well, with your background in research in this area? Are we seeing more evidence and research going into women in sports and equality in sport? Because
yes, it's I mean, as Anita says, certainly there are still issues and challenges, particularly for women in particular parts of the world, which is why, the IWG has set up the Anita White Fund as well, and we can talk about that if there's time in a while. I think it's interesting when I'm a historian by training. I read history at university, and for me, history is never about looking back, it's about looking forward. So you learn from the past and you move forward. And it's really interesting when you think about 30 years ago, we mentioned earlier, the internet was barely born. And so there are very different issues. The IWG was established at the end of the Cold War, the end of apartheid. The internet was hardly there. And now there are new geopolitical tensions and warfare. There's now forced migration. We're talking much more about climate change. We've obviously gone through the pandemic, as Lisa just mentioned, which is still impacting on us. We're talking much more about intersectionality of gender identities and empowerment. So some of the issues have been addressed in some countries, but not all of them in all countries. And now there are emergent new issues and challenges. And again, the IWG provides that network to bring people together who are looking into those issues and saying, okay, what do we do now to make those systemic changes to benefit everybody?
Lisa, what is the current Secretariat doing or hoping to achieve during this period? Like, how do we have impact?
Yeah, well, to pick up on the points that Anita and Elizabeth made, we do believe really strongly that sport and physical activity can contribute to a world where all women and girls thrive. But we also recognise that if sport is to deliver on that potential, that either in particular sports or in particular parts of the world, there may be a need to change the structures or the values of those sports to make them genuinely inclusive. So our role here at IWG, we've set ourselves 3 priorities: connections, insight, and advocacy. And in short, we want everyone on this call, but also everyone working in sport and physical activity around the world, to have easy access to the latest thinking, to have access to the latest evidence of the value of gender equality, the research and applied insights. Because what I certainly do continue to find is that in sport, of course, we're very good at competing, but I do find a massive willingness to collaborate around women's sport around the world. And so here in IWG, if we can make those connections so that anybody who's interested in advancing the cause for women and girls can access other individuals and organisations working with the same challenges, on the looking for ideas or inspiration, if we can provide them with the insights, the research and insights, so that we're not reinventing the wheel. So you've got access to all that knowledge freely available. Everything's free through IWG, right? Through the Insight Hub. And the advocacy is, if you can hear from individuals and organisations why gender equality has been impactful in their organisation, in their place, then what we firmly believe is that will help all of us move this agenda on. And to pick up on a point that was also made earlier, I am both encouraged but also worried by the fact that whilst we are making gains, I'm seeing a lot coming through the research which suggests that around the world people think, well, maybe we've gone far enough with gender equality now. You know, we've made some good progress and that's fine, but you know, we've got other things to worry about now. And that really concerns me, because as Anita said, you know, we're far from there in terms of creating that genuine climate where women and girls, all women and girls can thrive. But for me, we can grow those opportunities for women and girls, but it doesn't have to be at the expense of anybody else. If we can make sport more inclusive and welcoming, it benefits everybody. I speak to a lot of international federations who talk to me about the value of growing women's sport and why that just makes good business sense, apart from the fact it's just the right thing to do. So, you know, I'm both encouraged because I'm seeing progress. We're really clear here at IWG what we can do to help and help the network of networks, help each other, but we should recognise that we are in an environment where it feels easier sometimes to say, oh, well, you know, well, not right now. We've got other things to worry about. I think that's a big mistake, because if not now, when?
And as you said, one of the key elements of this is empowering that network and welcoming more people in, sharing more information. And you know, we want to grow that network all the time. What are the different ways that we're hoping to connect people? Because you've mentioned we have the Insight Hub, which is one of the key things that we're doing, which crosses over with research.
The Insight Hub is our opportunity to make easily available to anyone who's interested the latest research and insights. We are very much reliant on the network. So if you are sitting here thinking, well, actually, I've got some research, I've got a report that should be up there, or I know of one that should be up there, and it's interesting to me it's not there yet, you know, let us know. Because often for us, the barrier is just not knowing that piece of work is out there. If you want to easily know what's on the Insight Hub and what's coming up, subscribe to the newsletter. Again, reliant on the network to tell us that events are happening, where there are conferences or seminars or webinars. Our intent here is to make that knowledge available to you. So, you know, if there's upcoming events, we want you to know about them. If there are resources that you can access, we want you to know about them, and we want to know where you can get them. The final piece of the jigsaw for us at IWG at the end of every 4 years, of course, is our global summit. And in 2026, the IWG Global Summit will be in Birmingham in the UK, and that will be on the 9th to the 11th of July. So you might be thinking it's too soon to get it in the diary, but everybody's telling me that will come round quicker than you can imagine, Lisa. So do get that date in your diary. That is going to be your best opportunity to not only access the knowledge in the same way as you can through the Insight Hub, but to make those personal connections and network. It is the largest sum of its kind in the world. And a great opportunity for anybody working in the sport and physical activity sector to get access to the latest knowledge, make those connections. But if I'm also honest, my experience of this is get a shot of energy in the arm as well, because there's nothing better than finding the people like you who really care about this to help pump up your tires and help you push on again with the next challenge.
We're very keen to take on board the needs of the network as well to inform what we do with this current secretariat period, both in terms of forming and evolving the conference itself, but also this webinar series. So this webinar series, we really want to ensure that it gives you, our network, the heart of what we're doing, the information, the connections that you need. As we mentioned, the UK has the secretariat up to the 2026. We have our global summit to finish. What happens beyond there? What would you hope to see happens beyond there? And I'll go around to everyone as well afterwards, just to sort of see what the future could be for IWG, where we'd like it to go.
Well, the first priority for me actually is that momentum is maintained, because once IWG leaves UK, it will be moving on to another country. I can't tell you yet where that will be, because we're only just about to launch the bid process for who's coming next. So again, if anybody's thinking, oh, that's interesting, watch this space, because we will be promoting the opportunity to host IWG. But for me, it is maintaining that momentum. And how do we do that? Well, momentum really comes from within the network. We are trying to use the technology in the way that is available to us to connect people, to share knowledge. And we're trying to do that in a way that the power within that network is very much distributed within it. So it's not the Secretariat of the IWG sitting in the middle of it. It actually self-sustains itself. So my big hope for what will happen next is the many people within the networks around the world recognise the value of what we're creating here at IWG and continue to feed that knowledge through that network and use it to its maximum abilities. My second wish is that the new secretariat that comes in after us brings a huge amount of energy and innovation, and continues to advance IWG and how it operates. But that it also listens really intently to what the networks are saying, because our job is to try and help deliver on the needs of the network. So that would be my wish, I think, once it moves from the UK shores.
Elizabeth, where would you like to see IWG go next conceptually, especially given your wonderful overview of the history of IWG to this point?
It's always a mistake following Lisa, because she's kind of said it all already. But I think I'd come back to that point that we made earlier about reaching into regions of the world where we haven't reached into as well yet, where there are particular challenges in terms of gender equity, and regions of the world where the IWG hasn't yet been hosted. One of the things that came out in the book, and we talk about a lot with the IWG, is because the Secretariat moves every 4 years, there are challenges to that. I mean, Lisa just alluded to, keeping the momentum going. But those challenges are absolutely offset by the benefits of hearing different voices, of giving visibility to different regions of the world, and to really driving for an impact within those regions and speaking to the stakeholders in different parts of the world. So going forward, everything that Lisa's just said, but I would like to see the IWG really making inroads in places where it's been particularly challenging and where it hasn't yet been hosted. So those of you on the call, please think seriously about, do you want to host the IWG from 2026?
And can I just pick up on that point, Aoife, because I'm hugely grateful to the previous Secretariat in New Zealand, because we built the time to have a handover period between the New Zealand and the UK. But I'm also super grateful for the previous Secretariat in Botswana and Hami, who was in my post at the time. She would tell you, if she's on this call, I am forever asking her questions and seeking her advice, and in the same way as I do with Elizabeth and Anita. That is the strength of the network. And at times you sort of scratch your head and you say, well, how do you maintain the organizational memory as this moves every 4 years? And it's not straightforward, I can tell you that. However, I do know the right people around the network in order to do that. And that's my biggest reflection on this, is it does genuinely feel like one team. I hear a lot of people use that and I look and I think, I'm not sure you are, but in this case, we really are. And so, you know, wherever IWG goes next, I can assure them they will have the full support of the team here in the UK, and we will do everything we can to send them off with all the momentum we can give and send them off in the right direction.
And I think, as you said, that's something brilliant about IWG Women in Sport. The Secretariat, each Secretariat builds on the one before. So the Insight Hub was something that was created by the New Zealand Secretariat, and we can sort of take that wonderful platform and continue to grow it so that momentum builds every Secretariat. There's an opportunity to tailor it to the local needs, the local voices, but also to help build that global momentum. And Anita, where would you like to see IWG go next? What's your vision for the next 30 years?
Oh, that's a big question. I don't think I'll be celebrating it in 30 years' time. I'll be too old. However, I'll keep celebrating now. And I agree with everything that Lisa and Elizabeth have said about this, about the future. I was just struck, really, that the purpose of the very first conference in Brighton was to accelerate the process of change. And in a way, that's still what the IWG is all about. And there are still changes that need to be made. So I would like to see that acceleration, and I'd like to see people, signatories, move beyond signing the Brighton Declaration to actually taking action and doing something about it, having a concrete action plan and delivering on it. So those are the things that I would like to see in the future.
And Lisa, that's something that this Secretariat is looking at with regards to signing up new signatories to the Brighton plus Helsinki Declaration.
Yeah, it is. And evidence yet again that I listened to Anita. She always doubts that, but one of the key messages that I heard, not just from Anita actually, but from a number of individuals, is that, you know, words are great, but actions are where the impact comes. And so where we sign organisations up to the Brighton Declaration today, it's because they do have an action plan. And if you look at the IWG website, where there are several news stories of some of the most recent signatories, we talk about the work they're doing, because that's what's most important. First of all, that they're doing it. They're very clear what change they want to occur. But secondly, by signing up to the Brighton Declaration, they're not only making a public commitment to gender equality, but they're also signing up to being part of this network and sharing their learning along the way. That's all we ask of them, that, you know, they'd be prepared to talk about what the challenges are they're facing, how they're going about them, what they're learning, and where they're having to course correct and why. And that's the sort of knowledge, it's that applied knowledge. We don't want to reinvent the wheel here. We've all been doing this for quite a while, and we want to kind of keep on moving fast if we can.
Thank you for that, Lisa. We've had some lovely comments coming in on the chat, so let's just have a quick look. So we've got, hi, I attended the New Zealand Summit online. It was wonderful to have the opportunity to engage with colleagues globally It is, to quote Lisa, all about the network of networks.
Just on the network of network points, to pick that up, editorial about this. We're not trying to, you know, take everybody's networks and contacts and badge them all up IWG. That just couldn't be further from the truth. This is genuinely about the unique role that we can play to help connect the many networks that already exist, and really strong networks as well. That's the exciting part for me about all of this, is that it's an opportunity to meet individuals and organizations who are working really hard in this space. And all we're trying to do is, I guess, magnify and showcase what they're doing, but also find like-minded organizations and individuals all around the world who, you know, they might be interested in connecting with and sharing knowledge with. So this is very much about helping very busy people find other busy people to help kind of do this more easily and straightforwardly.
We have to talk about the Anita White Fund, because that's a huge part. It's an incredible program, and it's also going to have a massive impact globally and addressing some of the things, Elizabeth, that you've mentioned about sort of the global reach of IWG Women in Sport. Anita and Elizabeth, I'm not sure which one of you would like to start off by telling us what the Anita White Fund is. There's a clue in the name there.
Liz, you go.
Nicely passed. That was a Lisa O'Keefe rugby pass there. We'll come back to you, Anita White, about the Anita White Fund. Just quickly to say that this is a legacy of the Anita White Foundation, and there's two funds, the Anita White Catalyst Grant and the Kath Sweet Award, both named after two incredible women in the women in sport movement. But the purpose of the fund was to support projects for women and girls in sport in particularly marginalised communities. And we've given funding to 19 projects in 16 different countries. And we will be working with women, particularly in the global south.
Yeah, well, thank you, Liz. I think you've explained it very well. And what we've learned from our previous efforts is that a small amount of investment can actually bring back a huge amount of impact. And by providing a small amount of funding to some of these individual women leaders, it helps their development. It just helps them get on the road with what they really want to do and are trying to do. There's been quite a lot of women's leadership training that's gone on by different agencies over the last 10 years. That's been one of the things that's happened. But what hasn't always happened is they haven't been able, when they go back to their organizations and countries, they haven't been able to actually put their great ideas into practice and do something on the ground. And we hope that by helping them to do that, that's then a step on the ladder to even more activism in the years to come. So we see it as a catalyst to just get them going with some of their ideas and plans for bringing about gender equality in their own countries and organisations.
And I'm really looking forward to sharing the stories and the projects themselves, because there are some absolutely incredible projects going on. So keep an eye out for that.
I've seen a couple of questions about research. Fantastic. Delighted to hear that. We need more research, and particularly we need research in those parts of the world and around those topics that are currently under-researched. What we're planning to do fairly soon is to create a community of practice that will include a community of researchers globally to connect people with each other so people can share ideas, possibly collaborate on funding bids and so on, but with a real focus on what topics do we need to cover at the conference, so that we've got a couple of years now to prepare for that conference, so that we can then get the researchers at the conference speaking to the practitioners, speaking to the policymakers, so that the research has real reach and impact. So if you want to know more, please email me. I'll put my email address in the chat in a minute, and then I can add you to the list of people that we'll be reaching out to. But Lisa, what have I missed?
No, I think that's great, Elizabeth. And just to stress the fact that we are so fortunate here in the UK that our research partner is the University of Hertfordshire. But I guess to stress that we're not just looking to work with one research institution. And Elizabeth and I have spoken a lot about how we can collaborate with other institutions around the globe. So we are very interested in anyone on this call who has a real interest in this area, and whose organisation has a real interest in this area. Because again, if we can start to sort of identify who's doing what, that will help us shine a light on the work that's happening, but also help us identify where those gaps exist. And you know, as Elizabeth said, with the community of practice, that's where we can help as a collective identify where that focus and attention needs to go.
We have a very good question here. How do I convince my organisation to sign up to the Brighton plus Helsinki Declaration? I feel like, Anita, we might go to you for that one first of all, and then maybe on to Lisa.
Most sports organisations believe in the principle or value of fair play. And at the moment, things are not fair. Fair play doesn't really exist. And I think in trying to persuade an organisation of that, if they really don't see it, that's where the research comes in, and you need to gather the information which just demonstrates, usually pretty clearly, that women are often discriminated against or disadvantaged in some way. So what I would say is appeal to their belief in fair play, and produce the evidence that shows that the world of their world of sport ain't fair, because I'm sure that evidence is there somewhere. So I would use those two main arguments.
Lisa, is there anything you'd like to add to that?
Well, I hope that's where the Insight Hub and the IWG website will be helpful, because you will find there examples of organisations where we are absolutely singing from the rooftops about their commitment, but also the action that they're taking. So, you know, this is a great opportunity for the many organisations around the globe who recognise the importance of gender equality, to make clear to the outside world their commitment to this, but also to have the recognition of the work that they're doing. For those who are sitting thinking, well, I wonder if we should do this, then, you know, take a look at the stories of those organisations who have signed up, because they talk very clearly about why this is important to them and why this is important to the future sustainability of their organisation, their business, and you know, creating a sport or an environment which is best for their membership. You know, there are lots of examples in there, and I think they're much stronger advocates for this than me saying because it's the right thing to do. Go and read some of those stories and talk to your colleagues about those.
We've got a question from Raisa. They are a grassroots tennis coach in Geneva. Their question is: there are so few of us female coaches, and she wanted to know what help she could get to forward this effort for women and girls.
Well, certainly on the IWG Insight Hub, there are a number of case studies of organisations who have provided support programmes to increase the number of female coaches. And there may be some interesting information there in terms of how other organisations have approached it. Secondly, the power of networking. For me, not as a coach, although I also have been a coach in sport, but just generally being involved in sport, networking with other individuals who are also coaches or administrators, whatever the discipline is, finding those other people, I have certainly found to be a great kind of source of help and support, particularly when you feel like you're one of the few, trying to find other individuals. And so certainly through IWG, there's an opportunity there to connect. Elizabeth, I'm wondering, with your work with the WISH programme, what specific advice you would have for a coach?
Yeah, thanks, Lisa, and thanks for the question. So for those of you who don't know, the WISH programme is the Women in Sport High Performance Pathway, which I've the great privilege of being the project director. It is about high performance coaching, and it's specific to Olympic sports, so it may or may not apply. But given that this is a question about tennis is one of the sports that's on the WISH programme, and the International Tennis Federation have been extremely supportive of the programme. What I would say is, although the women who are on the programme are themselves high performance coaches, lots of them are doing outstanding work as role models and to support women in coaching in their countries and in their sports. I'll put the details of the WISH programme, I'll put the website into the chat, because if you go onto that site, you'll see which coaches are on the programme, and some of them may be able to support you as well. I've just seen a question pop up, high performance coaching Paralympics. The funding for the programs comes from Olympic Solidarity, so it's for Olympic sports, but do have a look at it, because we'll be launching the next iteration of the program from 2025. We're just finishing the current Olympic cycle, of course, with the Paris Olympics and Paralympics coming up. So if you look at the website, you'll see opportunities and how to apply for the next iteration, and who's currently on the program, who may be able to offer support either in your sport or in your country.
We've got a question from Tuko Sandrine, founder of Handicap in Action Association Cameroon. And she says, we have a real problem of disinterest in the practice of sport with disabled women and girls, and we have a serious problem with materials and support from public authorities. So I want to know, how can we implement a development policy in our country, Cameroon?
I mean, it's interesting because when I think of some of the projects we have through the Anita White Fund, actually some of that is that there are a number of projects which I think will be quite similar in context to that particular individual who's just written in that question. So what advice and support? Well, first of all, we'll be promoting those projects, and there's some really interesting examples in those projects of the way in which sport and physical activity are being used to help and support women and girls, including those with disabilities. So there's some interesting examples there. In terms of other advice and support, as a network, we're always looking for examples of what organisations are doing elsewhere in the globe, and we'll promote those. But also there's an opportunity to connect with other organisations. And I think that might be one of the advantages here in this particular space, is being able to connect with other organisations, working with similar groups of women and girls, to not just see what they're doing, but also to hear from them what impact they are having on the life chances of the women and girls going through those programmes. And I think that's where we advocate for change, because as we were saying earlier with the Anita White Fund, often it's small amounts of funding at that grassroots level can make a big difference. But I think it's important for us to play our part in helping to demonstrate that impact, because all of us in this, it doesn't matter where you are in the world, when you're trying to make the case for resource and funding, we've got to be able to demonstrate the impact.
And it's being able to access, sort of examples, case studies, information resources, and that's something that the Insight Hub can hopefully help with again, and also sort of that network where it's a place where you can go and ask questions, seek support, find an organisation that might be able to provide advice. I'd just like to read this comment out from Ruth Mafarisa. I was privileged to be the co-chairperson from 2014 to 2018. For me, given the level of gender awareness on gender in the country, the IWG conference in Botswana in 2018 heightened that awareness across sectors. It also revived women in sport across Africa. So, it's a good example of the impact that hosting IWG Women in Sport as a secretariat can have on the area. It's time for us to come to an end now. So I'd just like to ask each of our panelists just for a closing comment on the impact of IWG, whether that's on the women in sport movement generally, or on your own sort of personal career and journey within it. Lisa, would you like to start?
Goodness. Well, I'm sat here today because of the work of IWG 30 years ago. And I'm here today benefiting from the work that's happened within the network of networks that's IWG over the last 30 years. So, I am very clear in the worth and impact of IWG, but I'm also really clear that we still have a long way to go. But I am of the school of thought that we are all together in the same team on this endeavour, and that we will go further and we will go faster and we will create change which is much more sustainable if we collaborate. So that's why I'm here. That's what I'm going to do. You'll be tired of me all talking about collaboration and working together and the power of the networks, but I fundamentally believe that to be true. And so, yeah, I'm really excited for the next couple of years. And, I can reassure everybody that certainly here in the Secretariat in the UK, we are going to do everything we can to strengthen the network and the collaboration and the impact.
Thank you very much, Lisa. Elizabeth, what would your answer to that be?
So I'm going to cheat because I've got the book in front of me, and I just want to read out the concluding sentence of the book, which is about why there has been so much progress in the international women in sport movement. And it's testament to the individual women leaders who've been prepared to persevere in the face of opposition and adversity, and those who've led the IWG through subsequent secretariats. Their commitment to collective and global change over the following 3 decades has made sport a better place for women, and many societies a better place for women's involvement in sports. And to me, that sums up the impact of the IWG. And it's also the reason that you've got to come to the Global Summit in 2026. It is unlike any other conference you will ever have been to or ever go to, unless you've been to an IWG event before. It's inspirational, and it will change your life for the better, as well as changing the world of women in sport for the better. So come to Birmingham, UK in 2026.
Thank you very much, Elizabeth. And Anita, our last comment from you. What would you answer to that?
Well, I have to say that 30 years ago, I don't think we would have thought that the IWG would be where it is now. And it really is testament to the next generation, to Elizabeth and Lisa and those that come after them, which is why we must involve the young in taking this thing on. I couldn't compete with Liz's final words. I think they summed it up. And I'm personally thrilled at seeing the impact that this has had. It wasn't anything we even dreamed about back 30 years ago. But I should be raising a glass to you all this evening. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Anita. So thank you very much to all of you for joining us for our kickoff webinar and our Pearl Anniversary celebrations. This is the first of several webinars. We will be scheduling more. And again, as we said earlier, we would love those to be informed by what you, the network, want. So if there are topics or subject areas that you would like us to focus on, please get in touch. You can contact us through the website, through social media, or through our info@iwg.org email address. So please share with us to make sure that we provide you the information, the knowledge, the power, the connections, the network that you need to succeed in this. We will also have our newsletter, so that's the best way to keep in touch with everything that's going on, including upcoming webinar dates. So do sign up to that. We've also got the IWG main website and Insight Hub, where we will be sharing news and the latest research, insights, case studies, policies, and so on. Social media is always a good way to connect as well. So we're available on LinkedIn, Twitter/X, Instagram, and Facebook. So do connect with us there, and amplify as well. So if you know someone that you think should be part of this network, share IWG's post, send them a link to the IWG website. We want to bring everybody into this network and strengthen it, empower it, and make it as global and far-reaching as possible. It's been an honour to speak with you, and of course, a huge thank you to Lisa O'Keefe, Professor Elizabeth Pike, and Dr Anita White OBE for joining us for our first webinar. And I think it's safe to say that there's exciting things to come in the future of IWG Women in Sport. Goodbye.